This is our next episode of the CSNP Cyber Stories podcast. I'm your host, David Lee, and we have a very special guest today, Joe Hudson. Joe, I'll let you introduce yourself. What are you up to these days in the cyber world?
That's pretty much all that exists in my world these days. It's interesting how that used to be like a topic that would come up with friends that were cybersecurity professionals. Maybe we'd link up for a beer and we'd say, no, let's not talk about work. So I didn't really care about anything to do with cyber. And then kind of fell into this job, honestly, about 4 years ago. About 4 years ago, I'd gone through a career transition from teaching elementary school for about a decade, got into recruiting, hated it, thought it was the worst profession in the world. Actually got my teaching license renewed to go back to teaching. And a former teammate of my old company said, hey, well, we're starting up this new company. We could really use some help. Are you interested? And just the model of doing things right here, that's like the non-negotiable thing, is just don't toy with people's lives and don't BS anybody. And this company is just it's dedicated to cybersecurity from day one. I've been doing it since day one. I was very upfront with people in the early days of, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Please educate me. And the growth from what I've seen the cybersecurity world do in the last 4 years is just unreal. And being able to kind of be on the forefront of hot things that are coming is really fascinating, and trying to get prepared. But I think I even messaged you there, and I fell asleep twice last week in my chair just reading about AWS and twist lock and container security, and just passed out. I mean, it's so much fun.
Yeah, I'm really hoping people like yourself can help shape what the career path looks like moving forward, in terms of a pathway for people to just to chart how they're going to progress in this space. I think that's a big problem in this industry, because right now it feels like we're all intimidating each other with all these impressive certifications. But I really want to shift the focus back to essential trade skills, essential training that people can kind of ladder step their way into the field. And that's what I've been focusing on in my space, is just hands-on training for people who especially may not have a tech or IT background. What's their roadmap to get started and to get their first job? And that's been my focus as of ever since 2020, is to facilitate that pathway. Is how do people go from musician, for example, to junior cyber? What's that path look like? And how do they get real skills and not just theory craft out of their journey, and invest their time wisely to that end?
And I can tell that the organization has got, it was really ironic. So before we got on here tonight, I wanted to get my computer ready and make sure it wasn't too slow. So I started closing down a bunch of tabs and came across two profiles that I've had up for days, that these folks just happen to be involved with CSNP. And it was very ironic, because when I initially opened their tabs, I didn't even notice that. That wasn't why I came across their profile. So I actually reached out to both of them tonight. And, I think that it's very important to have organizations like this, because you're going to get guidance from people like me. I've never done this. I talk with people all the time, and I have a million stories that I can share. But when I first started working here, the original advice that was coming from every direction was, get your CCNA and get your Security Plus. That was kind of like hey, you want to get started in security, go get those two things and call me when you're ready. And a lot of people did, and they did get opportunities. That's not cutting it today. I do think that there is a lot of advice coming from many directions, and a lot of it has to do with training and certifications. But I can tell you that if I was trying to transition out of elementary school teaching into cybersecurity, I didn't have any money for certifications. I mean, I didn't have money to, usually the fourth week of every month. So there wasn't a lot of opportunity. And there's many people out there that they're in that same situation. They can't go drop hundreds of dollars on training and certification. Maybe they got kids at home. The difference is, though, there's a lot of organizations, I think, opening up the doors to scholarship opportunities or, free training. There's a lot of people that are giving discounts on Udemy or Coursera. Maybe they've literally created their own course. And what's really cool is that because these organizations and these courses were so much cheaper and more accessible, you had thousands of people actually go for that. Now there's common connections and camaraderie and sort of a jargon that is being shared. And honestly, some of these educators are really dialoguing very well with their students. And so I think I can tell you over the last year, I've seen a shift in terms of the respect that certain training and courses or whatnot are getting that they probably didn't get before, because it is spreading wider and people are starting to be proud to put that information on their resume, as opposed to studying for the CISSP or whatnot. They can say, yes, I'm doing that, but in the meantime, I've taken these 3 Udemy courses on hacking or on Linux administration or anything that really is tied to what they want to be doing, and it actually is relevant and it's carrying a little bit more value.
Yeah, I've had graduates of my program end up continuing to pursue things like that, where these little things, they have this kind of incremental snowball effect, where by the time they finish, a few more workshops, they can really prove that, hey, I've been putting together these skills over time. And I wonder if that's what is, to go back to your beginning thought of, well, what's cutting it today versus back in the early days of all this. I wonder if that's what it's going to look like now. Is this you're almost a Frankenstein of little workshops, and once you get the right things under your belt, is that what qualifies you to get started specifically in cyber, or should people just continue with pivoting from IT instead? That's a big question I have for you.
Oh, I'm definitely stealing your Frankenstein phrase. That's pretty good. And I do think that that's probably the right path for a lot of people. And some folks, they're going to take certifications or training that they're taking it simply because someone advised them on it, but they don't even know if it's like they just want to break into cyber, but they don't even necessarily know what direction they want to go with cyber. And that's what's, I think, really awesome about today versus 3-4 years ago, especially the result of the pandemic. My goodness, there's so many new things that have popped up in the last year that people have access to. Slack channels to communicate. You've got Discord channels where people are constantly dialoguing and learning from each other. You can't really put that on your resume. But I think that there's certain people that they're going to be tremendous value adds to the cyber community, but not really technical. And maybe they come from project manager backgrounds or they're car salesmen. These are people that know how to talk to an interesting crowd, no matter what it looks like, up here or down at the very lowest tier 1. And that's a tough skill set to find, but it's also tough to communicate that effectively on a resume. So really the hurdle that I'm seeing, it's not that people can't get the job so much as they can't even get the first interview. They can't even get a response to their resume, no matter how much training they put, no matter how many certs they get. I know a guy that got his CISSP, he got 3 AWS certs, and he got an eLearn security cert, all within like 2-3 months. And he couldn't wait because he was like, this is it. I'm going to get a job. 3 months went by. He didn't even get more than, I think, like 2 interviews. And we pretty much had to just manufacture those interviews. But he was really struggling to even get response. And I think that there's a big kink in the system with candidate, resume, and somewhere along the line, there's just cracks in the system to where that resume is getting its real true attention that it needs. But long-winded answer, I think that there's some people that it's going to make sense to go into IT, start from the ground up, start in help desk, and some people that's going to not only be really probably the wrong move, but it might actually deter them from wanting to continue down this career path because it just doesn't hook them, it doesn't catch them, and they're really not even interested or effective in that role.
So I've worked with quite a few people that fit what you just described. For example, one of my students is a former professor at a university and has great communication skills. But how do we get someone like that over the hurdle of, gosh, now I've got to land my first job interview in this all new space? How do we get rid of that pessimism where companies are like, I don't know if this is a safe hire. I don't know if I'm going to call this person. And with you being in this, helping people kind of matchmake into work like this, what's been your solution to that?
Talking to people and actually getting to know them is it's invaluable, because there are resumes that until you call that person, they're all the same. It's a piece of paper that probably struggled to put a bunch of content together, or they put a ton of time in and they feel really good about it, but they're still just a phone number on a piece of paper until someone actually picks up the phone to call. There's a lot of recruiters, I was guilty at once, who are just afraid to call people that it doesn't spell it all out for them on the resume. There's a guy that I was talking to earlier yesterday. He's in play for a global director role, and he told me that the recruiting firm didn't even ask him a single question. They just had him walk through his resume and they said, "Great, you're qualified." They pushed him forward. He doesn't even know what the role is, and that's a very common thing. So it kind of starts, in my opinion, it does start with recruiting a lot. It starts with educating the recruiters. I think one of the big problems, honestly, David, is that you have these firms that have done great work for companies. They've helped staff project analysts and data analysts and whatever. And then they go, "Hey, would you also like some cybersecurity jobs?" And they say, "Yeah, bring them on." They continue to apply the same recruiting methods to those positions. And this is a very different crowd. It's a very different set of expectations. There's a whole lot of, we want to get to point B, but we're still in point A. But I'm going to write this description for point B because I need the person that's capable of that. And unless that hiring manager has a really good download with the recruiters and says, "This is really what I need, and this is what I'm looking for, and this is what I value," those recruiters are just going off the job description, and they're qualifying. How many years of Qualys do you have? How many years of experience do you have with Metasploit? I hear these questions around the city sometimes. So I think it starts with the recruiting hiring managers relationship, or internal HR relationship with the hiring managers. One thing I think we're going to see here in the next couple of years, David, is a shift in this, because you have a lot of people that have gone through these hard times over the last few years. They're going to remember that. They're going to appreciate that journey. And so when they see a resume come through, I think they're going to be looking at resumes a little differently than what we've seen over the last couple of years, because there's just more people that have gone through the gauntlet of the struggle of getting turned down and told no a million times, but they're studs. They're phenomenal caliber candidates.
That's interesting. So you're pointing out where the gap is really an internal problem between hiring managers and HR, and I think that's the historic pattern that we've seen is like, hire me somebody who can do this, this, and this, and then that gets kind of by the time the recruiters of the companies start working on that, a lot of that can get lost in translation as they start to look for candidates. And that's why certifications have made an easier way to screen people. And maybe that's why we're so obsessed with certifications in this industry, is because there's something broken that certifications almost chronically, it's like a vicious cycle. But I agree with you. I think the connect between, what would you call it, HR and security internally needs to be reinforced to really give people a fair chance at these. And you're saying coming up here, there's just more empathy, right? More human empathy between with everyone having gone through these painful processes themselves. You're seeing things likely to pay themselves forward in terms of better candidate selection processes. What do you think that looks like? Is there going to be more standardized testing at the interview stage, or a continued search for other qualifications, maybe opening it up to people who've gone through workshops instead of certifications? What are you thinking?
No, that's great. That's a great question. I mean, I think you're going to look at a lot of different scenarios, because sizes of company, it depends on location too. Not saying that, because today's remote world, that brings its own set of issues, because you got students just got out of college. I want a 100% remote job. Not saying that they can't handle that, but everybody's situation is different. And if you haven't had real life experience working next to people or whatnot, I mean, you literally haven't had a job yet, you might struggle. And so the investment in that person, is that going to be there? what I am starting to see is a couple companies that we've worked with, or even companies that I'm just very familiar with. They're starting to develop some relatively immature, but very focused sort of training programs, almost what they would call like IT associate. And the smart companies, instead of spending 6 months trying to find your unicorn, go find a pony and pay them half, and then put 10 grand of training into that person over the next 6 months. Give them real attention. By the time you actually find your unicorn, you've got a resource that's truly loyal to your company. They're trained up specifically on whatever tools you need. I mean, would you rather, if you're hiring somebody for a tier 1 SOC role, but they're going to be tied to the SIM and it's Splunk, do you want somebody with a CISSP who's got a few years of experience, or do you want a Splunk certified, person that you could just drop a couple grand on or whatnot in training? You've got loyalty, you've got investment in these people, and you know what? Maybe they leave, maybe you help them grow out of their role. But what you're doing is you're strengthening the message that there are companies that care. You're strengthening your own processes to actually training some of these people up. You're actually dedicating focus to training your security professionals, because there's so many job descriptions that they want a million things on them, and really they need to do 3. And you can train those people up very cheaply, very cost effectively. But these IT associate programs, actually having something that's dedicated internally, having someone that's going to take responsibility for being that person's mentor, and not just assuming that it's a collective effort. I mean, I think really when you get some real green talent in, you need someone that's going to raise their hand and say, this woman's mine, or this guy's mine. I'm going to take them under my wing, and I'm going to make sure that they don't just fall apart or have to figure it all for themselves. Because working in an organization, you have to learn how to do that by itself, and then you have to be able to do your job from a security standpoint. But I do see a positive trend, David. I mean, I think that we're looking at a collective community that is very aware of the issues. It's kind of what most people are talking about now. And because of that, enough people are going to raise their hand and say, I've got a solution. What do you guys think about this? And people are going to say, yeah, let's try that. What have we got to lose? We're spending 4 months trying to hire people anyway,
Well, and that idea fits with the trend of security professionals increasingly specializing in accordance with the technical needs of the company, where there's these specific gaps in expertise that companies are striving to fill. And it would make sense that if you have somebody who's able to train employees, to able to disseminate that and provide that mentorship, that it makes sense that these programs would start to spring up and begin to exist. So that kind of begs the question of, are we looking at things like Google's in-house IT certification, taking the place of college? What sectors do you see this happening in? And what can a total beginner, say entry-level person right now shooting for SOC 1, what should they be looking for in a potential company that before they go, I think that's a good fit for me? What kind of telltale signs are there?
That's a good question too. That's a tough one to navigate, because when you're a candidate, I think looking for jobs, you've got Glassdoor reviews and you've got the job description and whatever you look up on the computer.
Yeah.
But it can be really tough to know, well, how invested are they? I talk to a lot of people, for example, that have gotten their start as a tier 1 person in MSSP, working that 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. And you know what? That probably wasn't that fun for them. Some of them, it was a thrill. I mean, it was absolutely exciting. But some of these MSSPs, they don't necessarily worry too much if you love your job. They just need someone monitoring the screen, and they know you're going to leave in a few months. And so I tell this to a lot of folks, and I hope it doesn't come across the wrong way, but I basically say, don't worry too much about your first job, because you just need to get that first job. It's ridiculously easier to get your second one once you've gotten your first one. If you have a security title in your job title and you apply to another position like a SOC role or something, you're going to probably get a call back, as opposed to someone who might have had a very relevant role, but their title wasn't security. And that kind of comes back to the education of the recruiting and the HR. They're looking for specific things that just scream, yeah, I'm a fit, as opposed to being able to read between the lines and understanding what they're looking for. But if you're a junior, you've got no experience, I mean, I really think you can hop on LinkedIn, you can look at that company, you can type the name of the company, you get in there and you just type security analyst. You scroll through all those profiles, you'll probably find, have they hired a bunch of very green talent here? Oh, here's 6 profiles of people they hired in the last 6 months. Doesn't look like any of them had any experience before that. This is probably a high probability target for me. This is where I should probably dedicate a little bit more attention, as opposed to one of these really big shiny companies that is kind of looking for X and Y and Z, and they have to have all these things, and they don't have a history of hiring that talent. So that's a start. It's really easy to do. It just takes a little creativity to hop on LinkedIn and run that search, to be honest.
Yeah, good thoughts there. And that also introduces the idea of FANG versus startup, that whole spectrum of company size versus what their culture is like, versus if you're a good fit there, and how, going back to the idea just there, how invested will they be in you after they hire you, say, for that first job? And there's a lot of questions there, right? What trends do you see in like larger enterprises versus smaller orgs? Or do you specifically work for a certain type of organization?
Oh, definitely both. And what's ironic to me is that a lot of the positions these smaller companies have trouble finding people for, because they kind of you need a little bit broader skill set. A lot of the times when you're in a smaller company, you might have a dedicated security person, but they might be doing a lot of reporting that another person at a larger company might not be doing, or they might have to get their hands on different tools that a siloed person might not have to do. But I do see some pretty good investment in those people. The problem is that the investment's there, but because they're a smaller company, they might not have the resources or time to give that person the attention they need to really flourish. But we work with some small companies where they kind of need jack of all trades, and they can't find the right people. All the time talking to people that are like, I would love a role where I have to do a whole lot, And so it's interesting that those two can't seem to find each other. I do recommend making connections on LinkedIn with recruiters, because what you do is you send a note out, you just connect with them, you drop a personal note. If they write you back, maybe they're interested in talking with you. Maybe that's a person that actually is open to having a dialogue. And if not, guess what you did? You wasted 5 seconds. But making some connections, because you just need one job. You need one person that's willing to go to bat for you. If I've got nothing cooking in my job search, I'm just going to spend 15 minutes on LinkedIn. I'm going to go through and just type security recruiter, or firms like a staffing firm that you keep seeing jobs posted for security roles. And you take the shot and you say, hey, I'm not sure if you're aligned to these security postings. I'm very interested in a lot of what you guys have been putting up. I'm just looking to introduce myself and see if maybe there's something that's a fit. Somebody's doing that exact thing. Well, you're not. And so that's them passing you to get that job. It's 15 minutes a day. You never know what's going to come out of it. So I think that can be pretty valuable as well.
I agree. I think spending more time on LinkedIn, networking, attending events, even if they're virtual events, can really be a good investment out there for you to open up opportunities instead of the dreaded cold applying and trying to craft a perfect resume using SEO. That I've done that process and it's miserable. It's absolutely horrific. Devoting hours on end per day to this draining process. At least when you're networking, you forge some kind of connection with other people and have a sense of what the industry is currently like. Another topic I'd want to ask you about is, I would be remiss not to ask you about the proliferation of cloud in terms of demand for things like container security, AWS skills. What are your thoughts on how important of a decision is it for somebody to pursue, say, Azure training, but then they're nervous that a lot of people want AWS right now, or maybe they're training Docker, but they're not training Kubernetes? What are you seeing in the recruiting landscape of, are employers looking for just general vendor neutral skill sets, or are they really searching for, hey, I use AWS, so you need to have XYZ qualifications specifically for AWS?
Both, definitely both. Great question, and that's tied to all levels. You know, you can't be a CISO of a company right now without having some knowledge of what are you trying to do from a security standpoint with cloud. Everybody's doing something with cloud right now. I've been working cloud roles for about 3 years, and I remember my first architect position that I got, cloud security architect role. It was very clear that this was the first of its kind that this company was hiring. And my question was then was, how are you going to qualify this person? And their response was, well, that's why we hired you guys. And I said, I'm so sorry, but I really don't know much about cloud. I am happy to learn. And so ever since then, I've been a student of it. I think everybody should be a student of it because it's going to help you. You don't necessarily have to become or want to become a cloud expert, but whether or not you're dealing with the GRC side of the house, or pen testing, or you're dealing with the DevSecOps stuff, you know, where a lot of people are trending to where they're getting a lot of opportunity to work with containers and securing pipelines, or they're working with specific functions in AWS. There's 200 plus, I think, services now that AWS offers. I think it used to be like 180, and I believe it's over 200 now. And that's probably going to keep coming. If you look at Azure, I think a lot of their services and the offerings are similar, and you know they're customized different ways. They're called different things. Azure, for example, I mean, most companies I believe have Azure Active Directory, and that's kind of a good starting point. AWS dominates the market. It has for years. That trend is changing a little bit for sure. I'm seeing definitely more companies interested in different solutions. Azure and GCP actually is also climbing the ranks. GCP owns a very small part of the market, but I know some very large clients that are GCP heavy now, and they're just now fully dedicating themselves to really diving deep with that. But if I'm just completely a blank slate, I want to go security, I don't know where I want to start, I'd probably start with cloud. You know, I think that's networking is a great place to start to get your roots. But cloud these days is it's on everyone's lips, and whether it's AWS or Azure, there's jobs out there. It doesn't matter, you know, which one you pick. You're going to find a job. Honestly, if you want to have a better shot, pick the one that there's not a lot of people out there with. You know, go GCP maybe because you're in a smaller pool of sharks going for that same fish. So that's just kind of my perspective from what I've seen. The jobs I've been working over the last 18 months, I can't think of one that didn't mention cloud. So it's very important these days.
I also noticed that a couple of years back, AWS came out with a security, cloud security certification. Since you said you're reading about a lot of this subject matter yourself and trying to keep up, do you have any recommendations for cloud or container security training that people can get their hands on without having to host costly cloud objects and incurring lots of overhead?
Yeah, well, the container security training, that's an interesting one. That's actually what I started reading about the other night, because what I really want to know, so like Twistlock, for example, how did they pitch themselves? How are they, because they got acquired by Palo Alto, so it's Prisma Cloud now. So there's great salespeople that can pitch that, and you've got this conglomerate behind it that can, you know, tell the story or whatnot. But I've talked to a lot of people that are like, yeah, I was exposed to that in the environment, or I did get my hands on that a little bit, or that was the focus. And I asked them, like, did you have that experience before? And they said, no, I just got it on the job. So you do have some dedicated companies and teams. They've been ahead of the curve. Like I can think of a bank here on the East Coast that they've been doing this for about a year now in terms of really zoning in on the container security. But going back to what we were talking about earlier, these kind of more affordable courses, Udemy or Coursera, or, you know, looking at, you know, we're not talking about code, but even looking at a Code Fellows, shameless plug there, right? I think that you have to, start there. Why invest a ton of money into something for big elaborate training if you don't even know if you like it yet, if you don't know if it sort of jives with your technical capabilities? I absolutely would always recommend spending several hours first watching YouTube videos. There's tons of content out there. Go into LinkedIn and type hashtag twistlock. See what people are posting. There aren't regular, just random people out there posting about twistlock. Somebody's got something to do with it. There are phenomenal voices all over LinkedIn that are sharing content every day that distract me for hours from my job because I see some awesome link. And I think start there. Spend your time really researching and see if it clicks with you, and go the cheaper, affordable route, even if you've got loads of money in the bank. Start with something just to test yourself to see, do I really want to go all in on this?
And the other big popular topic these days, of course, is pen testing, right? So
Yeah.
I think with the proliferation of Web 2.0, now people are talking maybe blockchain is Web 3.0, complete decentralization. I wonder, what are you seeing job-wise in terms of the pen tester market? So ethical hacking. I know you've let me know in the past, hey, watch out for AppSec opportunities in that space. So what trends are you seeing? And I've heard rumblings perhaps that we might be offshoring some pen testing. What have you heard?
Oh, all kinds of stuff. That's been an interesting dialogue because there's companies that say that they're pen testing companies and they're doing vulnerability scans and pawning it off as a pen test. You've got very monotonous pen testing jobs out there as well, where you're just doing kind of the same thing over and over again. Maybe a certain set of applications, or you're working on certain parts of the network or whatnot, but really like kind of the same job over and over again. So this has been a transformational topic for me since I got here, because when I started working 4 years ago, I thought this is the sexiest thing in the world. Pen testing is the greatest thing in the world. This is what you hear about. This is kind of what you think about. If you're not a knowledgeable person about cybersecurity and you just think cybersecurity, you probably think hackers. This is what makes the movies. And I think it's a phenomenal profession for people that know how to think like a defender. They know how to not only just identify vulnerabilities, but educate other people on why that was there, figuring out why it was there, how to fix it in the future. The problem is it's a profession that I think a lot of people want to go into, and it's a tough one to get into when you have no experience. I think it's a lot easier to get into a tier one position, or even like a cybersecurity kind of project manager, something where you're tied to these teams, you're getting exposed. Like that's easier than I think breaking in as a pen tester. So when I talk to people that they're trying to get their first job, I say, hey, I'm not telling you to take your eye off this ball or steer away from going this direction. But what I would be looking for is something that's going to be in an organization that has a dedicated pen testing team. You're learning what they're doing, how they're operating, how they're attacking you, what they're sharing with you. You're getting the jargon, you're getting exposed to all the technologies, and you're building camaraderie with those folks to where you're either going to get advice for how they did it, or you're going to get a chance to hop over to their team. But it's tough. I know there's success stories out there of people breaking in directly to pen testing, but offshoring definitely happening. I'm seeing a lot of companies. I'm seeing specifically managers. I can think of probably half a dozen executives and managers that have posted on LinkedIn, does anybody know a boutique pen testing firm? Like, I'm looking for something small. I'm looking for a group of people that just are trying to nerd out and do good work and clearly value this relationship with me, as opposed to a $400 an hour Big Four consulting firm to come in here and check off our boxes. So I am seeing a shift in what managers are looking for. Pen testers typically want to work remotely, more so than a lot of organizations. So I'm seeing companies have to shift how they hire for this as well, because you can say you want to hire people on site all the time. The market does have some power in dictating how you're going to hire them, honestly.
Wow, that's a lot of thoughts there to unpack. Is so a yes to potential offshoring, but overall, I'm not surprised to hear that this profession of pen testing is still undergoing a sort of evolution, because we're still trying to figure out what is a crime and what is not a crime. What is
the ethics?
The ethics of it, but also the legalities, what those standards should be. And even bug bounties are still very in this kind of experimental time period of we haven't quite locked a lot of these norms in. So I'm not surprised to for sure hear that there is some work to do there, and it's undergoing a change. So
I think that there's a lot of opportunity there to get the practice and to get the experience, even if that's not your job. It's one of the best areas of security to actually, where you're going to find a robust network of people that are doing the same thing as you. You might, work in the bakery goods at Walmart during the day. You're still able to go home and practice a lot of your skills. There's a lot of hack the box challenges. I'm actually part of a group here in Charlotte called the Queen City Skitties, and these guys are and women. They are really awesome because if you put them together, it's just this collection of people that some of them are dedicated professional pen testers, some of them are developers, some of them are not security professionals at all, and they just want to come together. But the people that are not even security professionals, they're creating capture the flag events for these guys. There's a 16-year-old with an OSCP in our group that created a capture the flag that they couldn't even finish. I mean, this is a really interesting community within security compared to kind of all the other communities. So I think that that's where you can get a lot of cool experience that actually is meaningful and useful. Even if you can't put it on a resume, it's still very useful.
I agree. There's so many resources for attacking boxes. Vuln Hub has lots of free boxes that you can just test your skills against. I think pen testing it has so much support from the training perspective. I really love that aspect of it. I agree. It's also a really fun community to engage with and to bounce ideas off of. Lots of discords out there for hacking this or that. Yeah. So, my other thought then is for somebody who's kind of road mapping their way forward, say they land that first opportunity, do they look for an internal transfer as a top priority, or are they better off shopping, say, after 2 years, getting their feet wet for perhaps another company? Or are you going to continually see this like 2-year revolving door in the tech world, or will there be more investment in employees causing more loyalty and perhaps more internal changes to their roles?
I hope it's the latter. I hope the opportunity for the latter is there, because you can invest all you want in a person, and they could be like, this is the greatest company ever. I've got the greatest boss ever. I can't believe I got my first job. Somebody comes along and throws $50,000 extra at you. It's really tough to remember how loyal you are when you're like, wow, that's life-changing money. And it happens. It happens every day. I got a guy a job. He cried one time on the phone because his salary went from 65 to 130K overnight. And he was actually struggling financially. I had nothing to do with getting that salary. That was just what we were paying. And honestly, the thing is, he couldn't believe that he could jump that high in money. To be frank, I was a little surprised too. But you don't get paid based on what you're getting paid now. And that's a big problem, is that people, when they stay at a company for a long time, they get asked, well, what's your salary right now? That is irrelevant, because I'm here. I've been here for 5 years. I've stuck it out. I gave them the Tom Brady treatment of the hometown discount. And people are getting undercut. There's companies that are trying to say, well, we're not trying to give you that big of a raise. Where actuality, if that person wants to really aggressively go to the market, that's their value. That's what they're going to find. So I do think that you can put all the training out there in the world, but you can't control the outcome. You have to have the right intentions and say, hey, you might outgrow this role, you might leave, but I really hope this is a great experience for you. And I hope that you'll champion for us and you'll help us to grow as well. I think, David, you've seen it, and you're one of the true contributors. There is a great tight bond across the cyber community, big picture, in my opinion. There's a lot of people looking out for each other. I can think of so many leaders that if I ping them right now and I just ask them for a favor, they're going to do it because they know what this is all about. And I think that might be kind of a misconception by a lot of people that that's not out there, but I see it every day, and I'm very proud of the way a lot of people are operating. So kind of the loyalty thing, you can't control the outcome, but I think if you can control your actions to try to build that camaraderie. And I think more companies are going to be doing that. The security is really, it's not its own thing in the corner anymore. I mean, everybody needs to be a security professional to some degree and have some awareness. And so it's going to trickle across the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. It already has. I'm really shocked to see how many executives have decided, hey, I'm going to invest my time in understanding the core concepts of security and to
Yeah.
help me make these decisions of, should I spend money on this? What are my risks actually like? And it's crazy when I have graduates who end up in GRC type of roles. It's so unexpected, but so cool to see as well that companies are really taking this seriously and building policy, building procedures around it. I I agree that this community is probably the most supportive at an authentic level, the most engaged professional community I've been a part of. And there's some amazing people out there with some amazing ideas as to how this industry should evolve, right?
Yeah.
And most of my thoughts are around the training of people and what that should look like. But there's others out there who are championing, for example, the ethics and legalities of hacking or other aspects of the industry where there's still a lot of question marks out there as to how should we proceed. But I agree, it's a really exciting community to be a part of, and it's crazy to see how much can change, how much can evolve in a matter of months, especially looking at just how overnight cloud became this must-have skill set. Incredible to see. And designing training makes it it's also makes it very challenging. You can't rest on your laurels
Well, how do you
at
go
all.
about that? I'm curious, actually. So when you're focused on actually developing training and delivering training, I mean, where do you start? And I'm asking this kind of more from, I'm curious, and I put you on the spot, but how do you approach something like that to where are
Mhm.
you thinking about the end results? Are you thinking about what kind of goes into it? Because I used to be a teacher and I had to come up with lesson plans, and I wrote curriculum for a school system for a couple of years. And
Mhm.
I remember being like, okay, what's the end goal here? Like, it's piecing it together.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. A boot camp style institution is, a private institution, and it's really a lot different from an academic one. So it's a lot different from a public sector school or a college, for example. And it's been really fun to design curriculum with that level of, I guess, freedom, to leeway to really look at the market with a critical eye and go, okay, what are the foundational skills that a total beginner needs? Say their last job, they were a barista, and now they're going, okay, we're going tech now. What are the core skills, the ABC blocks that they can build themselves upon? So, where we started last year, when we started this cyber program, we looked at the job postings and we kind of reverse SEO things and looked at, well, what does the market demand? And we tried to make sense of, okay, they're saying this word, but what skills are associated with that word? And so we came up with essentially a tree of words. And for each concept, say cloud, we extrapolated, say, 10 more words. And so you have essentially a mind map of, these are the requisite skills that you want to develop to get yourself into this space. And a shocking amount of those skills are really so-called soft skills, like,
Mhm.
turning things in on time, um,
Right.
understanding what is a project, what is project management, what is agile, how do you work on a team, how do you communicate with people on a team. Like, that makes, if you look at our tree, that makes up like a massive part of the tree.
Huge chunk, right? Yeah.
Like, I think it makes up 1/3 of the skill tree. So that's how we approached it. Was we made the skill tree first, and then we go, okay, we have this many days. Where do we put these lessons, and how do we get these to really be experiences for people, where
Yeah.
it's not just, oh, theoretically this should go here, but something where people can live through it and actually have that experience stick with them for the rest of their lives, and really feel that transformation of, okay, I work in this space now. And it's a constant evolution. You can't really be married to any one set of ideas, because the market, as you describe it today, it's this massive moving target. And we want to really train people to have fundamentals, but also be as competitive as possible with, especially with what's lurking around the corner, what the next big things are going to be, the next big needs.
Yeah, I think that you're right. It's a constant moving target. The 1/3 of the tree part that you were talking about, to go back to that pen testing group, the QC Skitties here in Charlotte, we had a kind of a meetup. It's probably about 3 weeks ago on a Saturday, a virtual meetup. And they had this guy come on that I know, and he's a great guy. He's been pen testing for a while. He sort of left a really great job to start up his own thing, and he's doing very well. But I think 30 minutes of our conversation was about public speaking. And that's kind of what I tell to people. They're saying, hey, I'm really looking to get into pen testing. What do you recommend I do? Go take a public speaking course. That's the first thing you should probably do, because especially if you're going to work for a smaller firm, a boutique organization, if you want to be a part of an organization that's going to be doing a lot of great work, you're going to have to deliver a lot of reports. You're going to have to engage people that otherwise you might be a nuisance to them. You might be a cost to them. You might be someone that's just giving them bad news. How do you figure out how to articulate that in a way that gets buy-in from people, as opposed to you're just a bad person? And when I used to teach 3rd and 4th grade, I'd tell my students all the time, guys, you got this huge test at the end of the year. I know this is all your parents care about, and don't tell them I said this, but I don't care about that test, because I'm going to have you all year. Here's what we're going to learn. We're going to learn how to look people in the eye. We're going to learn how to talk to each other. And every single month, we did a project. Each student had to do a public speaking project. They could pick the method that they wanted to do it. But by the end of the year, these kids were like different humans. And I'm hoping that carries on through the rest of their lives, because if you look it up, I think it's the #1 fear in America is public speaking, and death is number 7. So that tells you how scary this is for a lot of people. And you know what? You might take a course and you hate it, and you realize, nope, I don't want to talk to anybody. I need to find a specific type of job where that's not part of the DNA of the role. So you've educated yourself, you've narrowed down your search, and I think it is a heavily overlooked thing, and it is a huge separating factor for a lot of people that I get hired to, where I go, on paper, probably, could be close, but if you talk to this person, I promise you, Mr. Manager, Mrs. Manager, you're going to hire them, and they're probably going to be leading a team here in a couple months. So those skills are absolutely just invaluable.
Yeah, I'm so glad that to hear this from you means a lot, in terms of that the fact that employers are watching for this type of skill set. They are looking for people who can communicate, do projects. That's a big message to get out there, because most of the time you go on LinkedIn and all of us security types are busy flexing on each other with these alphabet soups. Right. It's like, oh, I got my master's degree yesterday. Oh yeah, well, I got my PhD yesterday. And it's like this, it's ridiculous in my opinion. I think we spend way too much time impressing each other with our latest certification or what have you. And there are fewer people out there who are either actually making contributions, such as new tooling or useful contributions to the community, or B, working on those other core skills like project work, teamwork, leadership, for example. Yeah. Maybe you become a manager and you work in security. So I'm happy you called that out, and I'm happy to hear it's still very relevant, more relevant than ever, perhaps.
I think so. Yeah. Imagine I know a guy, he was driving, I saw him down the street, one of my best friends, and he went to go interview for a business analyst job. And I said, when did you become a business analyst? He said, I have no idea. I'm just going to go wing it. But he's as charismatic as could possibly be. And this guy's he's one of my best friends for a long time. And he's he's Mark Wahlberg, basically. You can walk in any room and just own it. And he did. Now he's the director for all marketing for a very large real estate company. Just killing it, right? But it started with the soft skills. And it started also with confidence to say, man, I'm going to go after it. What do I have to lose here? And I think that if you can really figure out a way to be authentic in your conversation, it's very tough to say, I don't know that, or to, in the moment when you're asked a question, to where you know before they finish the question that you don't know the answer to this and you're trying to come up with your answer. I mean, if you're going for a plan, knowing you're going to get asked some of those questions, and you also know how to flip it to learn about, hey, actually, I haven't had much experience with that, but I'm glad you brought it up. That's something I've been studying about. How often are you guys working with that? Is that something that I would need on day one for this role? How many people do you guys have in-house right now that actually have expertise with that? Or is there an opportunity for me to kind of grow into a subject matter expert? Do you have any resources you'd recommend that I start learning between now and the next interview? I mean, what do you want out of that guy or that woman? Like, you want that hustle, you want that energy to where you say, it's really tough to measure someone's aptitude with a skill, but I can tell in that 30-minute conversation that this person has the right attitude for our culture. So yeah, I think practicing interviews, I don't even know how many times, David, I've had midnight practices with people that call me, text me at 11. I just found out I have an interview tomorrow. Like, do you have any time to just prep, and we'll hop on and we'll just kind of go through like a practice round or whatnot. And then they'll get out and maybe they'll get the job, maybe not, but they'll say, hey, I felt like that was a good interview. Like, I felt like I laid all the cards on the table properly. So regardless of the outcome, I did my best, and I think that's a good challenge for a lot of people too, but you got to practice it and you got to think about it. You can't just go wing it, like what you and I did here tonight with this great conversation.
Yeah, I think we also just described the plot of Pursuit of Happiness, that Will Smith movie.
Oh yeah.
Everyone who's like
sad
scared.
movie.
Yeah, well, yeah, everyone who's scared of the job search should definitely watch that movie though, and steal some of the tricks of that character who really kind of did what you just described, was say, hey, I acknowledge I have shortcomings, but I really want to grow. Like, I really want to chase this thing. And that's important to hear, especially if you've been job hunting for months and it feels like this is a bleak proposition and it's looking grim. I've been there. I've been through multiple career transitions myself, and I get it. It's scary going through that transition.
It's very easy for people like myself to sit here and say, hey, just keep trying, just keep going for it. Like, it's so easy for me to do that. But I remember when I was going through my career transition, I did a terrible job of it. I didn't plan it. I got very lucky to get a job that I had no business getting. My approach was just very lucky. I was completely scared out of my mind. I had no idea what a applicant tracking system was. I literally YouTubed how to make a resume. I mean, we're all in that phase at some point. I try to look at it as though, say you're 25 years old or even 30 or even older than that, but you want to break into security. Look how much time you have left until you get retired, right? Are you going to really be upset that you only worked there for 39 years and 6 months as opposed to 40 years? You have to be patient with this, and as long as you're not just clicking submit and crossing your fingers, and you're trying to do things intentionally to make connections, to improve the math odds of being found, of getting a response. If you shot off 50 resumes and you haven't gotten any response and you're not working on your resume right now, like, try something different. Make it longer, make it shorter, change some things up, try stuff. Like going back to the 15 minutes a day networking on LinkedIn. You've seen it. It's such an incredibly powerful tool. I used to think it was useless. I thought it was the most, I was like, what is this? I even had a connection request, or I found, it advised me to connect with my old profile from when I was a teacher, and there was nothing on there. And now it's the only social media I actually really use a lot, and it's become more of a social media because you can champion for people. But to go back to your certifications thing, and touting that all the time on LinkedIn and whatnot, there is a lot of that, and it can be, I think, very just kind of disruptive for people that are really struggling and trying to, if I'm struggling to find a job for 6 months, the last thing I want to do is go on there and find a bunch of people that are having great success. It's tough to want to do that, but those are people you can learn from. You see that, instead of going, oh, I wish that was me, like it, add them, message them, and just say, hey, I realize you probably don't have much time, but I was curious, like, how was that certification process? Was that valuable for you? Did you get good takeaways? Start a dialogue. You never know.
Well, I would say that about sums it up. That's a great thought to close it on. And I think to me, this final thought on that is just the sky's the limit really with this industry. I think it's something that it can be what we make it. But that being said, it's going to change every day. And I am definitely curious to see where it goes. I'm super curious to see if blockchain turns out to really be a thing. And I'm trying to imagine how the heck am I going to teach blockchain to a beginner? I don't know if I can even teach myself blockchain, but
Yeah.
I have a suspicion that's right around the corner, sooner than later. Perhaps the next like cloud type boom in the field, but we'll see. We'll see how things go. Joe Hudson, everybody, thank you so much again, Joe, for
Thank you, David.
taking the time to join us. I'm glad you got to connect with CSNP. I sent you the Slack invite, so I hope we can.
I joined.
Yeah, that's great. I think your approach to this work is exemplary in terms of really helping facilitate pathways for people who are passionate about this space and want to contribute to cybersecurity, either for the government or for a smaller organization. I think there's a lot of untapped talent out there that if we play our cards right and build the right systems, that I think we can help facilitate bringing those people into the tech world and really help make the world a better place, hopefully. So,
absolutely. I appreciate it, David, and I agree. The next CISO of many companies is looking for a job right now and hasn't even started their cybersecurity career. Having the dialogue and tapping into it, maybe you don't connect with it, maybe stuff doesn't resonate, but maybe there's one nugget that you can take and roll with and kind of start that snowball. And then 15, 20 years later, you're leading a company and you forgot you were ever in this position. But that's how I look at the market. There's nobody that hasn't accomplished something that might not accomplish something. And so, happy to help. If anybody ever wants to dialogue, I'm happy to dialogue as well. So thanks for the opportunity, Dave. This definitely didn't feel like an hour.
I same here. Snowball sums up so many things in this this line of work. I can't agree enough. All right, Joe, I'm going to wrap it up here. If you're listening, thanks everybody for tuning in. This has been Cybersecurity Nonprofits Cyber Stories webinar. And so I keep up with us on our YouTube channel and also check out csmp.org. You can volunteer there, or if you're interested in other things like our Wednesday webinar, pop onto there, check it out as well. I've been David Lee, and this has been Joe Hudson. So thanks, Joe, and thanks everybody for tuning in.